Thank you so much, Ben, for your very, very generous introduction. And of course, Ben was commissioned some time ago with my indecent email to help organize this event. So I'm very, very grateful to Ben's work and, of course, colleagues in the department. And it's great to be back here. After a few years ago, I came to Durham. And of course, I first came to this department, give a seminar when Ash was my host, when I was early career guy. So it's great to see Ash back here as well. So sorry I missed your retirement party last November, was it? Or something like that. So, and very grateful to many of you who turned up at this presentation. I was just in Manchester and yesterday, and unfortunately many of the faculty members couldn't make it. We have lots of grad students, but today I see so many of you, both grad students and early career, and of course, faculty members. So what I will do is to give you a very just quick rundown on some of the key parts of the book, so that then we have something to kind of kickstart and talk about. Okay, so the book has, because of the lighting, several main chapters. First chapter to sort of put together the main argument, and then second chapter is to go through some of the theoretical approaches which are quite prominent in critical human geography, ranging from, of course, Marxism to post-structuralist theories, actor network, assemblage, and non-representational theory, to, of course, post-humanism, post-phenomenology, and some of those perspectives. And of course, many of you are actually the key players in those areas. So I'm very, very happy that we can engage with each other today here. And then the third chapter was about what kind of theory for what kind of human geography, in which I brought in some of the sort of critical realist thinking together with the more recent kind of speculative realist thinking, which also connects to some of the post-humanist, post-phenomenology debates in human geography. And then, of course, move on from there to talk about relational thinking, which, of course, many of us are big believers in relationality and relational thinking. And then I move further to talk about how we can develop perhaps causal theories in relation to mechanisms of certain sort. And then finally, before I end in the concluding chapter, I got to kind of give a sort of personal reflection on my own journey in being involved in what's called the development of global production networks as a theoretical perspective, something like that. So that's what the book is about. Now, I'm very thankful to Colleen for another appearance today since the RGS meeting we had in last year. Unfortunately, it's actually meant to be more gender balanced, all right? But unfortunately, our dear friend Deborah Dixon travel was derailed by the rail strike. I know it's the pun. From Glasgow, he couldn't make it. So, but I'm very grateful that Colleen made it, and Team Cresswell team made it, and so on and so forth. Then when I went to China, a PhD student from Hong Kong U showed me the very first physical copy of the book, which she already got hold of it. I didn't have it, and she came, brought it to Guangzhou, and I was very happy to see the physical copy of the book. And of course, a few days ago, I went to see my English father, Peter Dickon, in Manchester. I flew in from Manchester. So Peter is now 86 years old, and I'm very happy that he's doing well, and I'm very, as you know, if you have read certain parts of the book wouldn't exist if Peter said something to me in October 1992 that basically told me, if he did that, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have believed in geography. So thanks to Peter for long, long, long support of my work. Okay, so I will briefly go through some of these key pointers. What kind of theory am I talking about? What to theorize? And in the book, I have set up sort of 3 key criteria to me that are important we consider in theorizing. And of course, the kind of how to theorize. It's not a methods book, right, so to speak. And finally, why bother to theorize, so to speak. So the key argument in the book is that theories are important. And of course, I started the book with David Harvey, 1969. I mean, you can tell by the title of the book, it has something to do with explanation in geography, 1969, right? So David Harvey mentioned at the end, by our theories, you shall know us. So in a way, I start with that notion to ask ourselves as geographers, have we been able to continue with that trajectory of by our theories, means to outside geography, means social sciences, humanities, and what have you, they shall know us. So that's the kind of beginning point. And hence, for the purpose of this sort of quick introduction, I see theory as an abstraction of reality. So in other words, theories are not sort of purely linguistic devices. Theories are meant to kind of reflect some kind of empirical, in our case, social spatial phenomena, because we are geographers, right? So we don't do just social, but also spatial. But of course, there are many kinds of theories. Some theories are more interpretive. I think Colin and team mentioned very well during our RGS AMC session that interpretive theories are much more important, perhaps to more humanistic kind of geographers, so to speak. There are theories which are also very normative. So if you think of feminist theory, post-colonial theories, very, very strong in normative positions. As you can tell, my position in this debate is more aiming towards more explanatory theory. It doesn't mean the kind of descriptive, interpretive, or normative theories are not explanatory. They can be, but it's just that I want to accentuate this notion that theories perhaps should also be explanatory. So that's the beginning point. But what do we mean by explanatory theory? So some of you may argue, okay, if I work on discourses, can discourses be explanatory in nature as well? So I took from Tariq's 2019 book this notion that even representations themselves can be a form of, if you like, mechanics that help us to explain certain kind of social spatial outcomes. So it's in that spirit that I will argue that even discursive practices, the study of those can in turn be still explanatory if you can identify what he calls the representational mechanics. But of course, as Ben has introduced very well, I'm talking about a kind of theory which are not so grand as if it's a theory of everything, or grand theories as I think most of us will have not subscribed to as of today. I mean, those days are kind of, I grew up the cultural turn in human geography, right, in 92, 95, when I was in Manchester doing my PhD in good old days. So, and I also believe that the kind of theory I'm sort of thinking about should not be so deterministic in outcome, and you will find out why in terms of some of the criteria through which we develop certain kind of theories. So in the book, I went into quite a bit on relational thinking, a bit on critical realism, and in particular also the more newer strand of literature on realism known as speculative realism, which connects back, of course, to some of the post-structuralist thinking, particularly in relation to assemblage thinking, Manuel de Landa, or Graham Harman, and so on and so forth. And of course, connect it back to some of the mechanism-based thinking in contemporary social science, in certain kind of sociology, political science, and philosophy of social science. So that hopefully gives you some flavor of the kind of theory I'm kind of talking about in the book. Next question is then, what do we mean by developing theory? What should be sort of some of the criteria that we should consider? So one of the criteria that I argue quite strongly for is that, I know it sounds quite funny coming from me, is that our theory should be normative, meaning that it cannot be the kind of classic positivist kind of objective theories. There are no such thing as theories that are objective in the social sciences, to me. All right, theories are meant to tell for who, on whose behalf, and what difference can the theory make. So here I brought in Judith Butler's quote to basically make the case that even if you are theorizing the present, the here, you are already thinking of the elsewhere. So that kind of connects to also what Jenny Robinson argues about theorizing from anywhere and elsewhere, so to speak. So I think that gives you that strong flavor. But I'm not subscribing to the extreme sort of radical kind of thinking in certain kind of theoretical approaches. For example, if you think of more recent Black studies or critical race theory or decolonization theory, that will take even stronger normative positions in terms of the theoretical claims. I'm also arguing against epistemological relativism, that all theories are the same or are kind of equally valid. So I still feel that if I go through the three criteria, some theories perhaps are more valid than others. And also, of course, there is a common concern that perhaps theories which are sort of subscribed to complete contingencies. So there are certain kind of geographical thinking that is entirely sort of premised on the fact that is, kind of everything is contingent on specificity and context, as if then it's difficult for us to sort of make some general claims. So I'm kind of trying to sit in between these two kind of ends of grand theories and radical contingencies to hopefully straddle a kind of middle ground in developing theories. Second is context matter. I think I don't have to tell you more. Social spatial context matter. A theory cannot be universalistic in the social world because the social world is a is kind of not possible, not open to a kind of what we call closed system in natural sciences, where you can study in the laboratory. Of course, if you believe in science technology studies, then even laboratories don't really replicate reality, so to speak, right? So the more in our case that even if you believe in causality matters, in terms of, if you like, what makes things happen, you still have to think of what makes things happen in particular contexts, right? So in that sense, of course, contexts will always matter. Our theories, I think most of us will subscribe to the idea of situated knowledges, that then almost by definition, theories cannot be complete. It has to be, no matter what we do, it's always partial. But then that doesn't mean we cannot attempt to try to, if you like, represent reality. But we have to do it within the context. So in that sense, I think I'm arguing for explanatory theory that will be more sort of more than just describing the empirical events and happenings, but also help us to think about the kind of underlying mechanisms of those happenings. So it's in that sense that theories, while it's still partial, we can think of its explanation and explanatory power. The third criteria is that theories cannot be so abstract that you can't really use it. All right? I mean, if I were to put it in the kind of plain languages, is that there is this notion, and of course some of us may be a bit more in that mode, is that think of theories as being practically adequate in helping us to kind of make change in the material world in which we live in. So in other words, theories cannot be just for intellectual purpose in a way. It needs to be related to the practical reality that we hopefully want to do something about. So it's not just about understanding the differences, perhaps the inequalities, the injustices in the world, but also about theories creating ways to help us to change those inequalities and so on and so forth. So the late Roy Bhaskar, the critical realist, in his last book, made this claim also that we only have one world in which we live in, and hence if you think of theory, they should be relevant to our everyday life rather than just beyond the everyday, so to speak. And that means also that our theories and explanations should be testable, not in a kind of positivist way, but certainly testable in terms of how practically useful in guiding the ways in which we want to change the everyday world, so to speak. So in the book, the second chapter, I went through many of the approaches that have the word theory in its, if you like, in its key approach, is key framework within the approaches. So for example, actor network theory, non-representational theory, assemblage theory, feminist theory, post-colonial theory. What does the word theory mean in that body of work typically? And hence uncover or kind of summarize the different styles of theory in some of the big tables. So apparently one of my referees is John Agnew. I didn't know until I actually saw him last year in Alec Murphy's retirement party in Oregon. So John said to me, I was your reviewer. I said, oh, I see. So he said he liked this table because it's good for teaching. So I don't know, all right? So we'll see. So I have this big table, all right, which is help to summarize some of this stuff. And many of you, your names are in there for obvious reason. You guys are the leaders in those fields, and so on and so forth. Okay, so basically that's what I've done so far in the book. And then after I've set this up, right, so going through, so it's not to say many of those theories are not theories, by the way. I'm just engaging with them to kind of identify to the readers there are different kinds of theories, different ways of theorizing, different styles of theorizing, to set up this broad parameter in order to then position what I hope to do in my own sort of direction. And that will take place in chapter 3, 4, and 5 in the book, which is about the kind of what sort of theory, or what kind of theory for what kind of human geography, so to speak. I think that's actually the chapter title, chapter 3. So here, I bring you back to the sort of argument, one argument I made in chapter 1, which is that perhaps today's critical human geography has gone too philosophical. I know some of us, us are responsible for that. But I think, the late Durham University in 2005 book for space mentioned that, those kind of social science tends to be physics envy. But I think we also have a little bit of philosophy envy today, meaning that we perhaps use too much philosopher's work to justify our own thinking. And in that sense, I kind of subscribe to, okay, Nigel right now is in Singapore. We are supposed to meet each other, but I can never find him because when he's in Singapore, I'm here. So Nigel in his 2021 book used this notion of fiction, right? So it means so philosophical that it becomes kind of fictional. And I think to a certain extent, we have a bit of that kind of a commitment in human geography. Perhaps things get too abstract, too specific in relation to, of course, the new philosophy, what Eric Shepard calls your ontology versus my ontology. So I thought that perhaps my preference is to be less philosophical. The reason is because I think we can probably never outbeat the philosophers in terms of philosophizing, because we have an empirical world that we have to deal with. Because I don't do pure philosophical research myself. I actually study semiconductors, so to speak, right? So it's in that sense that I feel philosophy envy could be something that we need to think about, as something that perhaps we need to be aware of that danger, so to speak. So the other aspect of theorizing is that because I would like to see kind of theories to be also more explanatory, then as you know, explanation almost necessarily entail identifying causality. And of course, causality is not unique to what I'm proposing, even in certain kind of post-structuralist writing. Of course, Ben and Colin are here, so in assemblage theory work that they have written about, there is quite explicit expectation of the identification of emergence and but not monocausal, but certainly multiple causality accepted within even assemblage thinking and so on and so forth. But of course, it's difficult to do that. What do you mean? How do you actually identify causality? And hence, in the book, I talk a bit about how we can perhaps kind of abstract causality through particular kind of relational thinking, and that's where relationality comes into the picture. Causality in itself, of course, is not unique to what I'm talking about. I mean, the natural sciences, causality is almost taken for granted. But then we know, even in physical sciences, the whole idea of causality is very difficult to be achieved because of the long-standing impact of human thought that causality is assumed if A precedes B, and hence A is the causality of B. But we know the specificity, the actual process that A causes B need to be told before causality can be established. So actually, in much of physical science, as we know, is correlational in nature. It's a study of correlation. It's not study of causality. We, perhaps in the human sciences, can do that better. So in that spirit, and in the book, I explain in greater detail of what do we mean by causality, drawing on some of the philosophy of social science work, and then of course transpose it to what kind of causal mechanisms we can develop in our explanatory theory. All right? So that's really what the book, for certain chapters, is about. And on the point of relationality, we know that of course many of you here have a huge sort of position in this whole idea of relationality, relational thinking, relational geography, which today I will probably call it as, it'll be hard for any of us to deny that, I'm not relational, I hate relationality. I think you won't get published, by the way, if you say your thing is non-relational, all right? So, however, it still begs on us to ask, so, okay, if everything is relational to each other, then what does that mean? It means relationality is just about everything under the sun. So that also compels us to think a bit more about, okay, are there circumstances, contexts in which certain kind of relationality matter than others? How do we know? In what sense? How do we account for that? So that requires, if you like, not just claims of relationality, but if you like, explanations of why relationality is about and why it matters. So the kind of the why and how, which entails almost necessity of thinking causally, so to speak. And of course, here I draw upon Doreen's For Space, as well as process sociologist Andrew Abbott's newer book, in which he talks about the idea of processual thinking that helped to trace some of the relational powers. And in the book, I went a bit into some of the emergent power in understanding causality and relationality. All right. Okay, so I will probably not go into the so-called methods part. The book doesn't talk about methods, process tracing, and some of the other things, and so on and so forth. So the final point I want to make is that, okay, I've set up, perhaps at least engage with some of the existing perspectives that talk about theory, trying to make the case that theories perhaps can be explanatory in nature, and to be explanatory in nature, you need to think of causality and perhaps some of the causal mechanisms that underpin that explanation, and the way that mechanisms operate in relation to the context, social spatial context in which causality can work out more or less than others. It still begs us the final question, why bother, right? Because at the end of the day, why not we just do what we like to do? Why bother to theorize in the first place? But I started my book with the argument that long time ago, David Harvey already asked us to produce theories in order for our discipline to have a standing within the broader social sciences and humanity, right? Okay, so if theorization is necessary, why bother? So now I bring you back to then David Harvey's book, only with the cover, I'm afraid, all right? So of course in Harvey's book, it was in this time, the young Harvey that was more positivist in nature. Then he actually didn't talk much about theory in that book. He talked about explanation, but from a kind of particular positivist scientific explanation point of view. Yeah, and we know very well today we don't accept that wholesale. We've done it. We've gone past that period. I'm bringing explanation back, but not in a positivist sense. But I'm bringing explanation back as one kind of theory. That's really what I want to register in this particular book, because I believe that at the end of the day, if we, particularly human geography, if our theories cannot be exported, meaning we are very, very good, as we all know, in bringing in ideas from outside geography. So import is not a problem. I mean, we are good traders, but we have, I'm not Donald Trump, but I sound like Trump now because we have huge deficits. Okay, we bring in a lot, but we are not exporting enough. So now I hope we can do a bit more export. So in that sense, the exporting is my so what question. We need to do that because we can't just be bringing in ideas without exporting some of these ideas. Because eventually we can only print so much US dollars, meaning that our currency will go down if we keep importing based on deficits. Yeah. So what kind of theories that work? Based on my own reading of social science literature, I think that, to be fair, many other social science disciplines are interested in theory building, perhaps in a kind of mid-range modular kind of theory building method, whereby different disciplines can contribute in different ways. Geography, I think Kevin Cox makes this point in the 2014 book, that we tend to come into the theory building towards the end, when sociology, poli-science, or what have you have developed already the big framework, and we add the so-called local spatial dimension to that. I'm a bit greedier, so I hope we actually can participate in social science or humanity theory building at the beginning, so that we have a bigger voice in theory building projects. And to do that, we need to be able to develop sort of theories which can work with other theories, and those theories tend to be, if you like, of mid-range nature. And that helps us to connect better with the social sciences. I think at the Author Meet Critics in London, Tim Cresswell made a good point that, of course, this kind of theory project I'm talking about tend to be more relevant for the social sciences than humanities, which is true. Right? So I'm less pushing for theories that gear towards, say, literary studies, literary critics, or language, and so on and so forth. The other aspect of my push for the so what question is to do my own positionality as someone coming, I'm a kind of essential outsider to Anglo-American geography, right? I was trained in British geography, but my entire career is kind of outside the UK, although framed within the kind of Anglo-American geography tradition, knowledge bases, publication outlets, and reading. And so I'm speaking English now rather than Chinese. But I do have that little notion that since I grew up in Hong Kong when the days when Hong Kong was still Britain, so I was a colonial subject, and hence this project is very special to me, because to be able to speak back, and here, I'm in the core of Anglo-American geography, isn't it? This is Durham, This is the heartland of theory. And as Derek Gregory has already argued a long time ago, right? Many of the theories we know of come with a kind of Eurocentric tag. Yeah. So I have that notion and that interest in so-called theorizing back, and hence the idea of developing theories in outside, if you like, the North, will help us to perhaps theorize back a bit at pre-existing ideas and approaches. And this is what Derek Gregory's argument was about. And the other point I want to make is that perhaps, if we are from the global, we say Singapore cannot be a global south, okay, but at least we are in the region of global south. I think that is probably factually correct, is that it's possible to speak back. So, the very fact that I can stand here and talk to all of you is a part of that speaking back project, right? So I think it is of course, human geography is a bit special. We are a lot more inclusive and open-minded than some other disciplines. This is something I'm very blessed to be in this discipline. But as you know, even in many of the post-colonial critics, Spivak herself have made clear that even though many people read the 1988 chapter as the subalterns cannot speak, she actually meant the subalterns could speak. Okay, and she owed up in 1999 that actually she made that mistake. Okay, and of course, Ever Said in his own foreword to his own book, he did also say that if you were denied the chance to speak, you will try very hard to speak up again. And I think theory development is that option of speaking up or back, and so on and so forth. So I made another sort of this kind of intervention early on when I had more black hair, when I started as editor of Environment Planning in 2001, and hence, I'm really happy now, 20 plus years later, we have this kind of development of truly progressive human geography in a kind of post-colonial era. I think this is something that I'm very happy to see it happening today. So, in the book, the penultimate chapter, I went into some detail about the development of the concept strategic coupling within the global production network theory, based on Manchester, Singapore project over the time, to showcase how this theorization is actually possible within that, of course, domain of knowledge known as economic geography, and how that body of work can export to the wider social sciences in terms of the kind of both conceptual and empirical work done. So, this is just the final slide, using the final line that I would like to ask you, kind of in a David Harvey sense. He asked us to put on the, poster in the wall, but in this case, you don't have posters, so it's, on your back, wallpaper in your phone or your laptop. If you can put that by our explanatory mid-range theories, you shall know and learn from us. So it's not very sexy, as one of the reviewers said, right? But I hope you practice this and make it sexy. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, thank you.